All right, y'all. Welcome to the show. Today, I got a whole heaping pile of show for you. A gigantic, fat, juicy pile of show. This is getting awkward, isn't it? I think it's pretty awkward. So I'm going to give you an update on what's going on in East Palestine, Ohio, and just how bad the situation is. The more we learn, the more it's a massive yikes. So we'll talk about that. We also have Ron DeSantis is now the favorite of some far right-wing televangelist weirdos. They are actively choosing him over Trump. Remember, evangelicals were like the heart and soul and the true core of the Trump campaign. And so it could be a big deal. That could end up being a big deal. And then later on in the show, we have another Republican looking like he's going to run for president. And we have Wyoming Republicans in favor of child marriage. I mean, you couldn't make it up if you tried, because these are the same people that go around screaming about LGBTQ people being groomers. And then they, in the same breath, they're like, and also I think children should get married. Okay, anyway, so let's go ahead and dive into it here. So you guys all know the situation in East Palestine, Ohio. You had a Norfolk Southern train derailment. That train was just packed full of all sorts of toxic chemicals. There was a chemical fire. You had fish in the region all dying. Fish just dying left and right. You had other animals like foxes, for example, dying. I haven't seen any reports yet on cats and dogs, but, cross your fingers, hope that doesn't happen, because it certainly looks like it will happen, if we're being honest. So the company did the classic company line, downplay, downplay, downplay until you can't downplay anymore, and then you go, all right, fine, let's evacuate, and then 7.5 minutes later, they're like, all right, guys, it's cool, you can come back. And, I mean, this is classic, right? We've seen this a million times over with a million different tragedies. I'm reminded of what happened in Flint, Michigan, when the water was poisoned. The water is still poisoned, by the way. Obama went there and drank a glass of water. They pretended like it was the tap water from Flint. It was almost certainly some, bottled water or whatever. And I see, everything's good here. What's the problem? There's no problem. I don't know what you guys are talking about. Well, now, shout out to this local news outlet who are going to give a little bit of an update here. And they got an expert who's dropping facts, dropping fact bombs left and right. Let's watch.
I'm Stan Boney. It's now been 10 days since Norfolk.
Stan Boney? Geez, I was not expecting that. All right.
Southern train derailed in East Palestine, and tonight we know more about the chemicals that were on the train.
First News digital reporter Jen Rodriguez has been in the village today, taking a closer look at what else was on that train. She has those details and much more in our top story tonight at 6.
We now know 3 more chemicals that were on board the Norfolk Southern train that derailed here in East Palestine just over a week ago. And we're being told that some of those chemicals are dangerous.
We basically nuked a town with chemicals so we could get a railroad open.
The U.S.
We basically nuked a town with chemicals so we can get the railroad open. So, in other words, the backstory is, after the crash, you had a chemical fire going. And then they were trying to figure out, hey, what do we do from here? So they decided to basically, if I understand it correctly, and correct me if I'm wrong, guys, this is my understanding, but I'm a layman trying to follow it and get the gist of it. They allowed other chemicals to burn to put out that chemical fire. And so here you have a hazardous materials expert saying, we basically nuked a town with chemicals in order to get the trains running again. Oh my God. Oh, it keeps getting worse and worse. Every day you learn a new fact where you're like, what?
Environmental Protection Agency sent a letter to Norfolk Southern stating that ethylene glycol monobutyl ether, ethylexyl-acrylate, and isobutylene were also in the rail cars that were derailed, breached, or on fire. Caggiano says ethylexyl-acrylate is especially worrisome. He says it's a carcinogen, and contact with it can cause burning and irritation in the skin and eyes. Breathing it in can irritate the nose, throat, and cause coughing and shortness of breath. Isobutylene is also known to cause dizziness and drowsiness when inhaled.
I was kind of surprised that when they quickly told the people they can go back home, but then said if they feel like they want their homes tested, they can have them tested. I would have far rather they did all the testing.
Caggiano.
So the expert on these toxic chemicals is saying what they did here is wrong. What they did here is bad. What they did here is unacceptable. They want people, they were trying to downplay it and say, go back home, you're good. But I wouldn't have made that call. You know, again, this reminds me of in the wake of 9/11, you had all the first responders down there helping people, clearing rubble, trying to save lives. And a lot of those people ended up dying, within 5 or 10 years. Why? Because they were breathing in this carcinogenic fine particulate matter from the buildings collapsing, and they didn't realize the massive health consequences of that down the road. You look at this toxic chemical fire, and you feel like the same thing's about to happen, right? All the fish were dying, a lot of other animals were dying instantly. Well, how long does this stuff take to manifest in humans? What kind of illnesses are we going to see down the road? And he's going to talk about this in a second.
Says it's possible some of these chemicals could still be present in homes and on objects until you clean them thoroughly.
There's a lot of what ifs, and we're going to be looking at this thing 5, 10, 15, 20 years down the line and wondering, gee, cancer clusters could pop up, well water could go bad.
Caggiano recommends anyone who's in the East Palestine area get a health checkup. He says get a record now of where your health stands so that moving forward you'll have documentation of any possibly related effects to the train derailment. In East Palestine, Jennifer Rodriguez, WKBN 27 First News.
That feels like such an impotent response, doesn't it? Yeah, go get a physical. Go get a physical. Let me know how that goes. Is that really enough? If we're being honest here, my instinct, even if I lived in that place my entire life, would be you got to get out. You got to get out. Especially whoever was downwind of that chemical fire. Oh, Jesus, it's going to get ugly, guys. It's going to get really, really ugly. So the point that this chemical expert made is they nuked a town with chemicals to get the railroads working again. Guys, they do not care about you. They care about business. They care about enterprise. They care about money. They don't care about the people of East Palestine, Ohio. This is a place that was economically depressed anyway. This is a place that's been left behind by time anyway. So just to really hammer the point home just how much they don't care about you. Remember this? We covered this a while ago. Tainted tap water isn't just a problem in Flint, Michigan. In any given year from 1982 to 2015, somewhere between 9 million and 45 million Americans got their drinking water from a source that was in violation of the Safe Drinking Water Act. According to a new study, most at risk are people who live in rural, low-income areas. So they go on to say, in general, the U.S. has safe drinking water, but, in certain places, there's a lot of contaminants in there. Now, so this is one report that I wanted to share with you. And again, we talked about it at the time. But then we also have this. EPA likely underestimating amount of toxic forever chemicals in U.S. water. Look at, you're not going to believe how bad it is. You're not going to believe how bad it is. So they go on to say they're citing a new report. Well, this was new at the time. What was it, like a year or two ago? 2022, so not that long ago. They're citing a new report and analysis in The Guardian where they take water samples in 9 cities, and here are the findings. The newspaper examined water samples from the 9 hotspots using 2 types of tests. An EPA-developed method that detects 30 types of PFAs. Those are some of the forever chemicals. And a more robust method that checks for a marker of the more than 9,000 PFAs compounds known to exist. In 7 of the 9 cities, higher levels of PFAs were found in water samples when using a total organic fluorine test that identifies markers for all known PFA compounds than when using the EPA test at concentrations up to 24 times greater. The EPA is doing the bare minimum it can, and that's putting people's health at risk. EPA water test undercounts PFA contamination. So they say, get this, recent studies have identified unsafe levels in the drinking water for more than 200 million Americans and detected PFAS in 97% of blood and 100% of breast milk samples. So, and these PFAS can lead to cancer, reproductive and developmental harms, immune system damage, and other negative effects. So, in other words, what they're saying is the standards that currently exist for the EPA, which those are not even enforced strictly enough, but the standards that are already enforced for the EPA, or on paper for the EPA, they're nowhere near good enough, and they don't test for anywhere near all the PFAS that are out there. And if you use a more accurate test to determine how's our water doing, you find that more than 200 million Americans have tainted water. And they found these things in the blood of 97% of Americans. That's astonishing. That's astonishing. Now, they go on to cite, the Biden administration and their infrastructure bill, and as part of the bill, they have $10 billion allocated to protect drinking water from PFAS and other pollutants. But, the point that is crystal clear is that ain't nowhere near enough, dog. I think what's so frustrating to me, hearing about the East Palestine train derailment, chemical fire, hearing about how, horrendous our water system is that we're not even just going to fix the problem. We're not even going to get back to baseline sanity. And, when I look at this stuff, I not only want to fix the problem, I wish we actually had a movement to get our infrastructure to number one in the world. I want to be the envy of the rest of the world when it comes to our infrastructure. Roads, bridges, airports, clean water, rail. We should do high-speed rail, right? I want to be number one in the world on this front and do the massive investment because it pays off in the long run. But that's not even in the conversation. We're not even going to just fix the problems. It's nowhere on the horizon to improve the drinking water for over 200 million Americans. They'll do little tweaks around the edges and just keep the most known PFAS out of the water in certain places. I mean, this stuff is astonishing, man. Jesus Christ, they don't care. They don't care. And the reason they don't care is that these companies are trying to squeeze every last penny of profit out of the system. They were talking about, we want one train conductor on the train, and that's it. A lot of these already run with two people for these giant industrial trains. And so in this situation, you had one of the cars was on fire for over 20 miles. It was sparking and it lit up. And the guy who was the conductor didn't know. They didn't know. Why? Because there's not enough people there. Because they care more about squeezing every penny out of the system. This is a crisis of deregulation. And this is a crisis of capitalism. And this is the logical end result. The Lever had the story that said they were... experts were saying we need better safety regulations, and they were deregulating the trains. And then this is the logical end result. Man, I feel for the people of East Palestine. I mean, to me, I view this as verification. This expert saying, we nuked a town with chemicals. Buckle up, man. It's going to get ugly. You're going to see all sorts of problems, cancers, birth defects, other health issues. I would get out and get out now, because this system is not looking out for you. This government is not looking out for you. Certainly these companies are not looking out for you. They said, oh, we'll give $25,000 to the people of East Palestine. That's literally $5 a person. They added insult to injury. They rubbed salt in the wound. They spit in your eye. Poison an entire town and then try to pay them off with $5? What do you want to get, a couple McChickens with your payoff? What are we talking about here? These executives should be in prison. These lobbyists should be in prison. And we should be working on fixing our entire infrastructure, all of our infrastructure, and make it number one in the world, because this is unacceptable. If you want to see me and Crystal Ball interview legends like Noam Chomsky, Cornel West, and more, subscribe to Crystal Kyle and Friends on Substack. $5 a month gets you the video version a day early. Remember, we take 0 ad dollars for this podcast. Or you can sign up on Substack for free and get the audio version a day later. Link in the video description box below.